Well, welcome to Untwist My Soul, our podcast that we began a couple of weeks ago. I think this is our third one. Today, I'm Pastor Marty Williams, in case you don't know who I am, and this is Pastor John Solomon. And we are going to be talking today primarily about a book that we read as a church this past month, in the month of April, called The Way of the Warrior by Erwin McManus. And this particular book has had a significant impact in John's life. And so I just asked him if he'd come share with us a little bit about what that is. And primarily what we want to do is we know that we need to be readers. We know that if we're going to lead, we have to read. We need to be self-feeders. We need to be able to feed ourselves and to lead ourselves. And it's often been said the hardest person you will ever lead is yourself. And so we need to be learning, but sometimes we will fall short of the learning process because we just get in a place where we stop learning. But we also can be guilty of just learning stuff all the time and not actually applying it. And so that is no good. I think it was C.S. Lewis that said that when you read a book, you shouldn't read a new book until you went back and read an old book in between. And that whole point would be to make sure that we're established what we're doing. I heard Brian Knight a while back said that instead of reading 10 books about leadership, why don't you read 2 books about leadership and then actually do what those books say? And so I think that that's a pretty good idea. You can read 10 books about walking with God, or you could read 1 or 2 and then actually start practicing what it means to walk with God. And so that's primarily what we're going to do. So, John, you took a sabbatical back in March. And so, first of all, why don't you tell us what a sabbatical is?
Thanks. A sabbatical was a time to kind of reconnect with God after being in a series of really busy times. Putting this place together was long, and it was at 8 years into church planting, so it was a really long time without any real away time to connect and just get to know what's going on in my mind and where am I walking with God well, and where has my old habits crept in, where is my flesh starting to be more dominant instead of my spirit, where is my wounded soul taking over unbeknownst to me. And that was really good. It was good to reconnect with my kids and just be a dad and not be in my job,
Yeah. And sabbaticals are somewhat common in the church world. They're also common in the academic world, where a teacher or a professor after so many years will get an extended time off to learn and refresh and let that mind be at ease. And so sabbaticals is something that we want to have as a part of the culture of our church. So we're doing that. So we realize that, most people aren't able to take a month off from their work.
Unless they get fired.
Yeah, unless you're in between jobs. But a lot of people do take an extended vacation or time away. So during this sabbatical, you also obviously had some time to read, and you kind of picked up on this book by Erwin McManus called The Way of the Warrior. Now, Erwin is a pastor in Southern California, pastors a church called Mosaic. I've known of Erwin for a long time. I think if you go in my bookshelf, this is like number 8 or the 8th or 9th book by him that I've read. And so I'm a fan. I've been following his work for a really long time. But this is your first experience with him as you've been reading it. So tell us about some stuff that God's doing in your soul as you've been reading this.
Okay, so the sabbatical, I ended up cleaning the living room and underneath the couch as I was I have 3 small children, and so there are toys that have not been touched in years underneath my living room couch. So I was going to clean the carpets, and I lift up the couch, and there's a book. And the last project over the last year, I haven't really read anything other than trying to figure out how to do new things.
Yeah, and for the project, in case somebody's listening or is not aware of what the project is, as a church, we went from being a portable church that was set up and tear down in a school into a $1 million facility, 11,000 square feet, fixed space. So a year of making that transition and a year of basically being the kind of the general contractor and designer for this place that Anthem Community Church now calls home. So that's the project. So when you hear John talking about the project, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, so in that process, I uncovered a book that you had given me probably 5 years ago, something like that. And it was called The Dangerous Calling. And as soon as I got in there and I bought an Audible book of it so I could clean and hear the book, which was an amazing experience. The first time I'd ever done that, to just be sitting there and doing relatively monotonous, mindless physical work, to be transported by somebody else's deep, intense gleanings from time with God. And that was amazing. It was David Paul Tripp, Dangerous Calling.
And Dangerous Calling being a book really written specifically to pastors. And the whole, that's his audience.
And his audience in this particular thing is, hey, don't be a hypocrite, pastor. Don't act like you have it together on the stage, or don't be holy man up front and not deal with your baggage at home or in your other life. Don't let sin shut you in a place where you're two-faced. And it was like, wow. Okay, so it was very, very motivating to just like, oh, don't let sin get a hold of me. And don't let there be two different Johns. Don't let there be a John up here and at work and a John at home dealing with raising children and being a husband and all that stuff. So,
which is you don't have to be a pastor to deal with that. We have a lot of people who are a different person when they're at church or when they're in, than they are when they're at home. I know Larry Osborne talks about that. He talks about growing up, being a pastor and raising his family. He knows a lot of pastors' kids, or PKs as we call them. They have three dads. They have home dad, they have church dad, and they have vacation dad. And like he was going to make sure that he was the same dad in all three situations, which is similar to what you're saying, to make sure that I'm not a hypocrite, that this is who I am regardless of what environment I'm in.
Exactly. And on the base of that, I've been waiting for this book to come out because I had heard Erwin McManus in a podcast talking about the upcoming release of this most recent book. And as he was introducing the book, it really just captured my attention because he was talking about it from the perspective of a 16th century samurai warrior. And if that warrior would be walking with Christ, what would his teacher have taught him? So it's set up as a series of codes to the warrior. And the first one just destroyed me because he says that the warrior fights only for peace. The only battle that is important, the only battle that matters, is the fight for internal peace. He goes on to describe how the interior of your heart, mind, soul is really what attracts and, in a sense, co-creates your experience, and you manifest the battles in you, in the relationships and the circumstances around you. And he goes on to say that the reason we don't have world peace is because we have no inner peace. And I was like, yeah, no, I get that, because
it's kind of hard to have peace in your marriage when neither spouse has inner peace. It's hard to have peace in your family when nobody in the family has inner peace. It's hard to have a peaceful church if everybody is gathering, but there is no peace within and learning how to do that.
And it's hard not to be a hypocrite when you know that the Prince of Peace is who saved you, called you, and inhabits your very being, and yet you lose your temper because a 3-year-old has pushed you over the edge. Like, you literally lose control by giving all of your authority and power. And
I am a child of the King. I am chosen and redeemed and holy and blameless and adopted to reign. I'm sitting in the heavenlies with Christ. And this 3-year-old is pushing me over the edge.
Just wrecking shop. Yeah, and I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, so lights are going off.
Or the person pulling in front of you on Eastern, or just all kind of silly things that can just undo us when we're not thinking and prepared and being and living out of who we are.
And he would say that is the only battle that matters. It's not what you can create, what you can accomplish, how many
Wait, so it's not about winning. It's not about winning the argument? It's not about trying to get my agenda so that everybody buys into it. It's really an internal battle that I am dealing with. So that maybe when Jesus said this whole idea of loving God with all we've got and loving my neighbor as I love myself, that myself part that we just seem to forget so often, that is not in third place. It's just on par with the other two.
Yeah, you just said like 18 things that are all like a part of that kind of aha moment of everything that I identify with myself as a forward thinker, as a strategist. I come from a financial advisor background, so I was raised by a financial advisor, a stockbroker literally, who is using different tools to look into the future to anticipate what's going to happen, and a very strategic thinker. Is chess and strategy and law and all of these different things that are very, I guess, just trying to control the uncontrollable or put form on things that you cannot know, but be really, really confident in your guesses because you've got to sell people that you know what's going to happen. Okay, so that's the same thing with a lot of preachers in churches, right? You know, I say, hey, if you say this prayer, if you do these particular things, then all of a sudden, God's going to work out everything for your good, which kind of gets translated as God's going to work out everything the way
I want it. Right. Yeah. Wait a minute. I am coming to church and I am giving my money and I'm even teaching third graders Sunday school, and he still left. It's like, what do I do with that? You know, my mom still got sick and died. I thought I was doing all of these things so that wouldn't happen. And it makes it really difficult.
So his whole thing is the way that God's created me to be a strategist, to be competitive. I'm not a calm person by default. I'm relatively high strung and competitive. And that is not
and
a
he
bad
has
thing.
he has a whole chapter on being competitive. So
But it's
beforehand, how did
what?
you see? Yeah, beforehand, how did you interpret being competitive?
Okay, so especially in like kingdom. So I come to Christ late, and I was like 35-year-old, and then I get brought into church where I have an ability to be a minister in the kingdom, to build the kingdom. And I know in the back of my head that I'm building a physical kingdom and a spiritual kingdom. But I always kind of, because I'm not a lead pastor, I'm not a seminary guy. I just figured, okay, I'm just going to take the nuts and bolts. I'm going to be like Nehemiah. You know, I'm going to go out, I'm going to build a wall.
I know how a hammer works, so I'm going to go do that.
I can do that.
Right.
I'll leave all the deep theological stuff to other people like Pastor Marty here, and he can tell me to calm down.
Because I barely know how to hold a hammer, so I got the other problem.
But it got to the point where I say putting a Jesus bumper sticker on it. You know, you're going about and doing the same things that anybody's doing in a regular job, putting a Jesus bumper sticker on it, when all I'm really doing is doing and trying to do the things the best way that the world knows how to do them for success in the kingdom, and at the expense of my focus on my internal landscape and on my spiritual development, and to the point where you get blinded by the different physical, tactical circumstances that you're in, that you forget that you're in a spiritual game. So this guy was saying, hey, that desire to win, that desire to accomplish and do and all that stuff is correct. It's God-given. However, Jesus came here to say that the way that you win is not the way the world wins. The way that you win is that you fight for your peace and you win. Your peace, which he has given to you, but that you have to fight to receive.
And if we're paying attention to the words of Jesus, he tells us that. I think it's in John 14:27, where he says, listen, I have a gift for you, and what I'm giving you is peace. But I don't give. It's not the way the world gives. So what you're used to, the way you would define peace, how you would go after it is not what I'm offering. And Dallas Willard, you're talking about deep theological. Dallas Willard is just like makes your brain sweat. But, you know, one of the simple things that he said that I could understand is that, listen, hey, here's what Jesus does. He just takes everything that you normally think of and turns it upside down. And you think being first, it's all about being first. He's saying it's being last. You think it's all about having the biggest fist and the ability to hit somebody and knock them down. And Jesus is coming at it. No, when you get hit in the face, you got to be at the point where you turn your cheek. So talk about how has that impacted you?
Okay, so I'm a military guy, and I've been in.
So let's just have a little bit of John background. So there is athlete, baseball player, competition win, good at it, went and played baseball in Japan kind of thing, highly driven father, stockbroker world. It's all about winning. Whoever's got the biggest toys and the most money and that wins.
Apparently, number of wives was important in that collection.
Apparently, yeah. That was. So I'll let you tell that part of the story. And then your father gets cancer and dies, and you're there
59 years old.
59 years old. So you're there watching that happen, and you're in your 20s at this point in time. 9/11 happens.
Right after he passed.
Right after he passes, and then you find yourself boots on the ground in Iraq in the Army, where they called you Grandpa because you went in so old, okay?
True.
So you got a lot going on here. So now, with all that background, this whole idea of turning the cheek kind of thing.
Well, it goes back to what's the purpose? You know, one of the reasons I have such a varied background in the different things that I've tried is because I'm a seeker, and I know that there's something missing in my life as I go through these different things. And when my father, who was very successful, you know, from a wealth development perspective, but then gets cancer and dies before he has really the chance to enjoy any of it, you know, I was like, well, I ain't doing that. I ain't spending the rest of my life doing that. But I didn't have anything to replace it with other than this long-term love of music and this knowledge that there's something about music that just puts me in a different place. So when he was gone, I went to school to study music. And then this war happened with 9/11. I was like, man, I can't sit around here singing, you know, opera songs while my buddies are getting shipped out, because I lived in San Diego, so I was surrounded by Marines and Navy guys. So I went and joined, again, thinking that I was going to do my duty, and that's my purpose as an American, is just to, you know, keep the world safe for democracy or whatever. The battle that I've never sought to win was the battle for my mind. And he says that the warrior knows his mind, and the warrior wins the battle for his mind.
Which is not, you know, this is not like Erwin McManus didn't make this up.
No, sir.
This is the Apostle Paul writing to the church in Rome in chapter 12 and verse saying, listen, you've got to renew your mind. If there's going to be any transformation, if there's going to be any way that you're going to even worship God in truth, right, then I have to renew my mind. So the battle is in my mind, because my mind impacts my emotions, and my emotions impact my behavior. So instead of trying to change my behavior by coming up with a different behavior, I need to fight the battle of my mind. And when I begin to understand that my mind is renewed, and that as a follower of Christ, I have the very mind of Christ. I have that at my disposal. All of his wisdom, everything that he's got, I have. So the battle for my mind begins to impact my emotions, which will allow me to turn the cheek when I get punched, you know, whether that's an emotional punch or a physical punch or whatever it is.
No, Marty, no. Wait, what?
What?
That might as well be a smack in the face.
It might as well be. That is right. That might as well be that smack. So how are you doing that? How are you putting that into practice?
I focus on remembering what it feels like to be connected. Like when I feel at peace, when I have moments of peace, I know I finally understand what it means to abide in the vine. Like I'm in Christ. It's a very physical sensation in my chest where I feel very much like when I first got saved. I'm lit up. I'm spiritually on, and my mind is calm, and I'm in love. Like, okay, so how he loves us, yes, love God with all your heart, mind. The feeling that I get, the sensation that I get, is like being in love, like as in his love. If his love was a spotlight coming down and I'm in it. And it is wonderfully beautiful. And it's gone in an instant.
Yeah, so what are some of those things you practice to get in that? Or to stay in that?
Perspective is everything. You're a sports guy. I remember getting introduced to this when I was in high school. My family started going through divorce, and it wrecked me emotionally, which affected my hitting. And then I found out about something called a sports psychologist, because that was one of the things that somebody suggested that I go do. And I was like, okay, that sounds dumb. But, anybody that pays attention to athletes and...
Every world-class athlete on the planet right now has a sports psychologist.
Because
it's a part of their team.
Excellence at any level, at the end of the day, is a head trip.
Yeah.
And if your head is not in the right spot, then it will slow you down. You will not have the right biochemical situation going on here, because this drives all the different pumps that put out all the different stuffs that keep us balanced and all that. So the only battle that needs to be won in the batter's box is elimination of distraction. The only way that you win the battle for your heart and your attention and your actions and your love and your emotional being is to remember the perspective that the only battle that you have to fight is for your peace. Because when I'm at peace, I am abiding, and then he fights my battles. Then he goes before me. And then my strategies are nothing. Jimmy just introduced me to a song where it's like we're worshiping the God that sees the stars from above.
That's pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah.
The universe
I'm looking down on the stars.
Whatever that means. I'm just saying that, like, dang, okay.
Yeah.
That then I can be useful in my weakness, as I and my ego and my limitedness surrenders to him. I actually receive and experience the promises of his heart, of his mind, of his emotions. And then I walk in a different way.
Right. So things like being still and knowing that he's God, getting a proper amount of rest, proper amount of sleep, proper amount of off time, the proper amount of own time. Because a lot of times we think we need some time off. Some of us need some time on. We need to work with a purpose towards something, because we've got too much time off. But there's these practical things that we all know about and we've all heard 1,000 times. Make sure you eat right, make sure you exercise, make sure you're getting sleep, make sure you're hanging around with people that bring you joy, making sure you're putting yourself around people who are building into your life instead of sucking the life out of you. These are all these basic things that almost every one of us, I mean, if you're taking the time to listen to a podcast, you know that. You've been told that 1,000 times. But it's the doing it. It's the actual doing it. And a part of our Pure Heart weekends that we do on a Saturday afternoon, depending on how the schedule goes, there's between an hour and a half and 2 hours where we just allow everybody to be silent. And we got to kind of have the worship center cleaned out, and you've got 2 hours where you can't talk to anybody, you can't be on your phone. You're journaling, you're praying. And to hear people talk about how that 2 hours is refreshing, but yet felt like 4 months. Because we're so used to just being on the go, 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 because I'm trying to win, win, win. And the way you win, win, win is dominate, dominate, dominate. And I'm going to be bigger than you, louder than you, smarter than you, prettier than you, thinner than you. Then that's how I'm going to win. And it's just this, and then we are the hamster in the wheel, or we're the dog chasing our tail. And it doesn't work. So we've got to we've got to put into practice those things that we know.
So that's what, the how got really interesting. So if my peace is so easily interrupted, I have to know why. If my mind is so unmastered as a 45-year-old grown-up, moderately functional by societal standard, if my mind is if I take time to pay attention, is such a busy, unfocused place on what really matters. Part of the thing that's nice about a sabbatical is I knew that I needed quiet. I knew that I needed to find out what was in my mind. And boy, can worry hide itself in so many little different corners. Worry, this thing that Jesus keeps telling us over and over and over again, to not worry. It is so deceptive in the way that it will hide. So some of the things that I associated myself with as core parts of my identity were simply behaviors that were born out of trying to cope with worry.
Yeah.
And I could say that again because that one is gigantic.
We'll say it again.
I couldn't.
Well, we're so dominated by worry because we're thinking about our past, which we can't do anything about, and then we get all this anxiety about the future, which we can't do anything about.
And we don't even call it anxiety.
And we don't even It's
no,
just
no.
it just.
I don't have anxiety.
I'm not anxious about that.
Anxious about it.
I'm planning.
I'm planning.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that
calculate every possible way that can go wrong, and I'm going to make sure none of those happen.
Yeah, and the whole time your stomach's upside down, and all of this stuff that we have going.
I take a pill for that. It's fine.
So what would be? Yeah, that's true. That's very true. What would be your hey, here is my bottom line biggest takeaway from reading this book?
The peace it's a battle, it has to be fought for. You will never, in this life, in this world, I don't know, I can't speak for heaven, I ain't been there, but it's always going to have to be something that you fight for, because free will is part of that equation. I have the ability to put my mind where I want my mind to be as an act of volition. And my mind can either be on conforming after the pattern of this world, or it can be renewed and refreshed and focused on the promises and my identity of who he is. Now, it's a muscle that needs to get flexed because it's different. Mm-hmm. It's a different way
so our mind, and what's ironic about that is that our mind is actually one of the very few things in life that we actually can control. And that if we will control our mind, then we will in a much better place to relinquish control of all of those things that we don't have any control over. Because I'm learning to draw my peace and my calmness and my comfort and my identity from who I am in Christ, not anything that I have tried to accomplish.
And then you want to watch what you can accomplish?
What do you mean by that?
I'm just so excited about the prospect of just in the few brief months as I've taken the next steps and uncovering. This has been like an archaeological dig, right?
Yeah.
The Dangerous Calling book was like, hey man, you have a problem between this is a church personality and then you have discrepancies in your personal life that you need to handle because you're going to die.
Yeah.
It's going to kill you.
Right.
And then you have...
and a great chance of taking other people with you.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
When you're captain the ship, you're not the only one on the ship, and if the ship goes down, then you're responsible for some other people going down. And that should get our attention just in and of itself right there.
And, Pure Heart, it was kind of like the reminder, the second reminder of after my first encounter with Christ that, okay, I have shame to deal with. Like my salvation did not deal with my shame. My salvation, Jesus reconciled us. Like the sin problem's gone. And he showed me that there's no need to have shame. But man, there's so many things that are still core to my identity that I would associate with, hey man, I'm being authentic to myself. Mm-hmm. I'm not a warrior, I'm a strategist. Whoa, okay. Sure you are, buddy. In the quiet stillness of me and God, having that revealed as coping mechanisms was very revealing. So it caught me into say, what else gets in the way of my peace? I didn't know I have boundary issues. I didn't know that I was such a people pleaser. So this book started a continued journey into more core identity stuff that gets in the way of my peace.
Yeah.
Because I get knocked out of that spot where I'm abiding in him and I'm basking in his love and just walking on sunshine, yeah. You know, just feeling good, just like, yeah, I love you, bro.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty cool to think, when you think about the life of Jesus and you read the Gospels, to think that he was never in a hurry. You know, we have no instance where Jesus ever rushed somewhere. You know, sometimes somebody was talking about this the other day. It was like, we'll read a verse that says, and then Jesus went to Galilee. And then if you look at where he was at and then where Galilee was, and you take into account of that meant we just think he went to Galilee like he got in his car and he was there in 30 minutes. Going to Galilee meant he just went on a 5-day hike with his buddies. So that was 5 nights of campfires, and that was 5 long days of walking and talking. Because there's no radio, there's no phone, there's no nothing. So just going to Galilee.
How did he get anything done?
Did he get anything done? Right. Well, he never wrote a book. He never went to college.
He didn't have good Wi-Fi.
He didn't have a good Wi-Fi. He never, he didn't have all of that. So, once we begin to really understand who Jesus is, and that's what it is, he's saying, I've come to give you life and life to the full. And with that is peace. I mean, peace is one of the fruits of the Spirit. I mean, this is one of the things that we are so after, and yet we think that we're going to find peace in monetary security, or we're going to find peace by some promotion or being something or winning a medal or whatever. And it's just, it's just silly, and, it's like, I think about, you hear these people who've won Oscars, and there's kind of like, okay, well, where's your Oscar? Well, it's upstairs. It's the second bedroom. It's the doorstop. It's like literally the Oscar, that's what it is. Or the Grammy is it's a paperweight on my desk. It's just like,
it's not enough for them.
It's
either.
not. No, it's not. It's not enough.
What have you done for me lately?
Yeah. What have you done in that moment? So maybe next week, or in the next couple of weeks, we'll do a podcast where our focus will be on shame, and what is that talking about? Because we're both in the process of reading and studying, daring
amazing.
to lead, and there's so much that's wrapped up in that shame.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That if I can let go of that shame, then I can begin that process of fighting for my mind.
The warrior only fights for peace, and one of the things that the shame, the coping that I was realizing that I was going through is directly tied to a lot of the work that's done around vulnerability and shame.
Yeah.
So just
those
again, things that I thought are core to my identity that are nothing other than coping mechanisms.
I'll close with this, just kind of a cool story on it's a confirmation to me on how God works. John took his sabbatical in March, so he left like the last day of February, and during that month of March, we had one lunch, and that was towards the end, and we that was on purpose to have that complete continuation. But in that month, I decided that the book club that I started this year, that the book was going to be The Way of the Warrior. And we had promoted it and all of that, and John hadn't been around. And so he comes back, and it's like April 1st or April 2nd, and we're sitting in my office, and John's telling me about, what's really grabbing me. And he tells me the Daring to Lead story. And then he says, and I'm reading this book by Erwin McManus called The Way of the Warrior. And just how God works those things together. And that he knows what we need. And it's never a question of, is he speaking to us? The question is, am I going to listen to what he is? Sometimes he puts the book under the bed, under the couch. Sometimes it's just your pastor standing up and saying, hey, you might want to read this book. Sometimes it's a song on the radio. God uses all kinds of things if we'll pay attention. So thanks for sharing. Thanks for listening. We're going to try to do a podcast. We'll do it live every Tuesday afternoon at 2:00. And then obviously you can listen to it any other time. And we'll try to do this at least once a week. So hope you have a great rest of your day wherever that might be. See you next time.